Okay, today video. I was going to go on my own way on the Greeks, but reading a comment, I think I've been pushed off that into something that might be more interesting. So I'll just start with the Greeks and treat them quickly and see what happens. So the thing I just wanted to say about the Greeks, and historically there are questions that can be asked, but let's just say it was the Greeks. It's not a history lesson. Two things about the Greeks which I think are very important. One which might be the most important thing that's happened to humankind ever. Okay, the first one is that it came to their time, the Greek city-states over 2,000 years ago, and there were all these gods, you know, the Thor and Poseidon and all this lot. Don't worry about the gods and what their names are. And I know Thor wasn't one of their gods, so don't bother writing in. But as you know, they had all these gods. But if you read the plays that are still extant from those times, there are lots of them, it's quite obvious that the elite, which were just all the men of the city-state, the men, the Greek, or let's say Athens, the Athenian men who were the elite. Women came next and slaves after that, or let's just say women and slaves didn't count. There was only the men that counted. It's quite evident that the men didn't really believe in the gods. There obviously will have been one or two that will have been, you know, sticking with the old stuff, but generally it was advanced thought and acceptable not to say out loud, because the men of the city would not be happy with them, the men of the city, if they went round saying that they didn't believe in gods. They just quietly, or made fun of it in plays, didn't really believe in the gods, but they all prayed to the gods, they all talked as though gods existed, etc., etc. They just made believe at all times that the gods existed, except when, just in the privacy of their own minds, where they really just knew that the gods didn't exist, or something like that. So if you got that, it's quite an important thing. In historical times before that, and obviously again this is all a bit wishy-washy, but before that, the people believed in the gods, and the gods were doing things, and they did things, they had ceremonies for the gods which would make a difference, etc. The Greeks still talked of the gods, they still had the ceremonies for the gods, etc., etc., but they didn't really think it was doing any good, because they were too advanced in their thinking for that sort of thing. All right, and that's going to link into the third part. The second part, which I think is the most important thing that's happened in human history, is that the Greeks stopped tribal or family retribution. They stopped the idea that if something went wrong, you went to your father or chief, and the father or chief would get it sorted. They basically put the city-state in charge and established that when something went wrong, you call the cops. Basically, the family head or the chief paid taxes to the state, and the state would sort things out. Now, the tribal elders, the family heads, were often obviously the people that would be voted in to be the heads of the central state, but it was the central state was who you called when things went wrong. That is a huge difference to all the history before, is that it was the head of the family or the head of the tribe which called all the shots, or who called all the shots. And it's, can you just imagine what the difference is? You go to your tribal elder and say, my brother's just been killed, and the tribal elder now has to say, well, we know what we've got to do. We get in a group and we go to the town hall, city hall, and we tell the authorities, and the try and influence the authorities to do something about it. But it stopped all that vendetta stuff, which could go on for generations and generations, and basically was one of the founding of civilization. Right. Quickly, let's get on to the third part, which I think links into the first part. The difference, a comment. The difference between hope and expectation. What is the difference between hope and expectation? I think we can say in the old days of ignorance, there was more hope. As the commenter said, in the modern days of more information, expectations are the new word. They are the reality. That's what you have. You have expectations because you have the information to logically or whatever compute what really should happen. But going back to the videos before, let's take an example. If you're now a young person just leaving school, what are your expectations for a good pension? Now, there is an example of what I've been talking about in the two previous videos. With all the information that the young person has, their expectations are what? And this is an example of it. Unless they are in a very particular situation, they don't have reasonable expectations. Their expectations have now become hopes. They hope they can have a decent pension, but they really don't go around expecting that they're going to get a decent pension. And there are so many other facets of their lives where their expectations, where they're not allowed expectations anymore. They do not have the informational input to compute how their life is going to go. They have to fall back on hope because they don't have the information. Life has moved somewhere, too fast, too slippery, to something, and where a couple of generations ago we could realistically have expectations of this, this, this and this, the modern generation really can't have these realistic expectations. The best that many of them have are hopes, and that I think is probably a bit dangerous. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, bye.